about. Thank you. She's going to be talking about the exposure of terrestrial birds to microplastics. Now, we all know that plastics are pervasive and everywhere, and they're finding more and more plastics in more and more places. As a public service announcement about plastics, some people don't know this, but I think a lot of people do. If you have plastic that you throw into your recycle container, if it still has a label on it, it ends up going to the recycle place, they reject it, and then it gets transported over to the landfill. It's an unfortunate reality that we live in. The United States is still struggling with recycling plastics. We're getting better. We need to build a better market for it. But we also have to prepare whatever plastics we put into that recycle bin in such a way to reduce the amount of rejects, because they currently are rejecting over 75% of the plastics that come into the recycle bin. So if you would, try to remove the labels. What I have found is, especially for paper labels, if you stick it in the microwave for like 7 or 8 seconds, it warms up the adhesion, and then it comes off a lot easier. But so please try and, it's an imperfect process, but please try as best as you can. So anyway, back to our speaker, Lexi. She is currently finishing up her research on this topic at UTSA. She is a graduate student there. She got a Bachelor of Science degree from Mary Hardin Baylor, so she's smart already. And she's joined the lab in 2022. And while in the science department at Trinity University, you worked at Trinity University, right? The science department. And is also a Texas Master in Natural. In fact, she went to the class the same time I did. And we went, I know 43. You. As she walked in, she said, I know you. It was like old times again. So anyway, please join me in welcoming Lexi Baum and this very, very important topic of microplastics in our wildlife.
Right here. All right. Thank you for that introduction. Like was already said, my name is Alexis Baum, but I go by Lexi. Feel free to call me Lexi. And I just wanted to thank y'all so much for coming out and listening to my topic, which is on the exposure of terrestrial birds to microplastic and the effects of urbanization and ecological traits. Okay, so let's jump in. Plastic pollution. There's been about 8.3 billion tons of microplastic that has been produced since it was created in 1950. And unfortunately, about 60% of that has either found its way into landfills or into the natural environment. And it's actually projected that by 2050, there's going to be about 12 billion tons of plastic in the natural environment, which is very frightening to think about. Okay, so what exactly is microplastic? Microplastic is the breakdown of larger pieces of plastic into smaller pieces of plastic. And this is usually due to UV radiation, physical abrasion, and weathering. So the size range of microplastic is all the way from 5 millimeters to 0.001 millimeters. Microplastic is divided into 2 separate categories, and this is based on their source, which is primary and secondary microplastic. So primary microplastic is what we generally think of most of the time. It's actually created to go into industrial and cosmetic products. So an example of that in cosmetic products would be like the beads that are found in facial cleansers. It can be found in shampoos, toothpaste. I was very surprised to find that it was like the sparkles in eyeshadow sometimes. That's what the sparkly stuff is, which is frightening. But one of it, yeah, because I wear it. One of the major sources of primary microplastic pollution is from synthetic clothing. So like what I'm wearing right now, let's say I'm wearing a polyester shirt and I stick it in the washing machine. Whenever you wash it, it's releasing thousands of fibers, which are plastic, and that's getting washed down the drain and eventually gets into the natural environment. So secondary microplastic, like this picture here, is going to be the breakdown of this large bottle into smaller fragments. So microplastic finds its way into the natural environment and accumulates in areas like urban and industrial areas, landfills, wastewater treatment plants, and agricultural soil. Microplastic has a negative impact on ecosystems, wildlife biodiversity, human health, and human food safety. And when wildlife are consuming microplastic, this can cause a false sense of fullness, which can cause them to not eat as often and cause malnutrition, GI blockages if the microplastic is large enough. And it can also decrease in fitness. So every single year, there's more plastic that is being produced, and therefore there's more microplastic that is accumulating within the terrestrial environment. So that's why it's of such pressing concern that we understand microplastic pollution and where they're accumulating and how it is affecting imperiled species and the biodiversity of these species. So there's been a lot of research that's been done on marine wildlife and ecosystems of microplastic pollution. And now it's starting to move to freshwater, but there's really very little research on terrestrial ecosystems and wildlife, and especially not very many in birds. So birds are actually an effective indicator or bioindicator for plastic pollution. And the reason for this is that they occupy different trophic levels, they have different dietary types, they inhabit different habitats, and they're also exposed to microplastic while they're foraging. The current research mainly is focusing on raptors, scavengers, and songbirds. But unfortunately, the sample sizes are very small, and so more research needs to be conducted. So the first research that was ever conducted, to my knowledge, was in 2016, so pretty recently in Shanghai, China. And this has a very small sample size. It was only 16, but they had 16 different birds and extracted their GI tracts and collected all the anthropogenic material found in the GI tracts. And they found that of that material, 62.6 of that was microplastic. So the most studied bird in terrestrial microplastic research is going to be the tree swallow. So there's two different research articles on that, and they focus on either the GI tracts or the fecal sacs of tree swallow nestlings. So what's really important about this research is that nearly all of the GI tracts of the tree swallow nestlings and the fecal sacs contained microplastic. So we know for sure, yes, terrestrial birds are being exposed to microplastic. But another really important discovery is that we fecal sacs as an effective way to be able to monitor microplastic exposure in these species. And it's also a non-lethal technique, so we don't have to kill the birds to be able to figure out. So they figured out through this research that there is trophic transfer of microplastic that's passing from aquatic emerging insects to the parents and then to the nestlings. So foraging strategies could affect the exposure of microplastic in birds. And so there's been a research article that has been done on thrushes, and they found that thrushes were an effective bioindicator for microplastic. So the species that they studied were the common blackbird and the song thrush, and they found that the song thrush was more highly exposed to microplastic, and we'll see why in just a second. Here we go. So they found that ground foraging birds are more highly exposed to microplastic because they're foraging for food on the ground and they can mistakenly identify a food article for microplastic. And they also found that soil contamination with microplastic in it is differing based on the land usage. So let's say agricultural soil that has a lot of microplastic in it. It has way more microplastic than forest floor soil. So as you can see here, up on the top, the song thrush eats from agricultural soil while they forage around agricultural soil and fields. And the common blackbird is on forest floor. Which one do we think is going to be consuming more microplastic? Surprise, I already said it. Okay. The song thrush is going to be consuming more microplastic because they're foraging in an area that has more contamination. Okay, so urbanization can influence the feeding behavior of birds. So as I said before, urban landscapes have a higher density of microplastic. And so wildlife is very smart, and they learned to exploit all the different food sources, all the artificial food sources that comes along with urbanization. So wildlife has been altering their foraging strategies. You can see that here in this picture where the black vultures are feeding on in this landfill. So there was a research study done on this, and they collected the regurgitated pellets from the black vultures, and they found that 77% of the regurgitated pellets included microplastic. So how are we going to assess the effects of urbanization on microplastic exposure? So we use model species that live across an urban gradient. So that's why I chose Crested caracara, and the scientific name is Caracara fluncus. The important information about the crested caracara is that they are non-migratory in Texas. So they're going to stay in Bexar County year-round, and their Texas breeding season is January through September. That was the last date where they have had a nestling in the nest. They prefer to nest in areas that have grasslands with adjacent trees nearby. And the breeded pair also stays within about 1.6 miles away. They have a high territory fidelity, so they usually always stay within there, and they protect it. I can see whenever another caracara comes along, they will drive it off. So they're also opportunistic feeders. So I don't know if any of y'all have noticed, but on the sides of the highway, whenever there's a dead bird, not a dead bird, there could be dead birds, but a dead animal, you'll see vultures, but you'll also probably see crested caracaras. They eat on carrion a lot. Okay, so there's an increasing number of crested caracaras within urbanized areas, and you can see more dense population in areas that has an artificial food source, like hen houses, slaughterhouses, landfills, and livestock. They're taking advantage of those food sources. And the reason why crested caracaras are such a good model species is because they are holding territories year-round. So we know, and they have the same territory, so they're being exposed to microplastic in that certain area. And they're living across an urban gradient, so I can collect pellets from nests or nesting sites all across San Antonio. And then they also regurgitate pellets, which I said before. So anything that is not digestible, like fur, bones, microplastic, will be regurgitated up into a compact pellet. And that's what I will be collecting underneath the nesting sites. And crested caracaras are also exposed to microplastic while they're foraging. Okay, so I have 3 objectives in my research. The first one is really just trying to see, okay, are terrestrial birds indeed exposed to microplastic? And with my findings that I have had already, I'm still in the process of getting all of my data. And I have found, yes, almost every single one of the birds do contain microplastic. And my prediction is that most GI tracts will contain microplastic. So objective 2 is I'm really looking at the linkages between microplastic exposure and ecological traits. such as foraging strategies. So what I predict is that birds that have omnivore and granivore diets are going to be more highly exposed to microplastic. And the reason for this is because they're going to be feeding on the ground, which is where most of the microplastic is going to be found. Objective 3, what I just talked about, is going to be investigating the effects of urbanization on microplastic exposure. And I'm using the crested caracaras as a model species. So I believe that with increasing urbanization, there's going to be a higher microplastic load found within the crested caracara regurgitated pellet. So the bird populations have significantly declined over the past 30 years, and therefore biodiversity has declined. So this research is really important because it will help us understand not only how we're exposed to microplastic, but how wildlife are exposed to microplastic. And it can also help inform remediation efforts and conservation guidelines. Okay, so in objective 1 and 2, I've been collecting birds. So no birds have been harmed in this research. I am collecting birds from window strike surveys. I've been collecting them over at the main campus at UTSA and a little bit for about a year at Trinity. Another great way that I've gotten GI tracts is from Texas A&M, and that's mostly through the Lights Out Texas program. And I've heard that a lot of people in the Audubon Society are involved in that. So that has helped with my research a lot. So I'm going to be conducting these window strike surveys probably until fall of this year. So I'm still going to be collecting more data. So I am dividing foraging strategies into diet type and feeding behavior. So the diet types that I am analyzing is granivores, insectivores, frugivores, nectivores, and omnivores. I decided to leave out carnivores because they're pretty thoroughly already examined in terrestrial research. So I left that out. And so the diet type is now divided into feeding behavior because it matters where these birds are feeding, whether they're feeding in the trees or if they're feeding in the air or if they're feeding on the ground. So these are the 8 species that I chose, and each of the sample sizes is going to be at least 10. And the reason why I chose these, first of all, is really I had to be opportunistic, just whatever we were finding that were colliding into windows and what Texas A&M had. But also I wanted to choose the birds that specifically represented a diet type. So I wanted to have one that primarily fed on that one diet type. So for example, black and white warbler, they're primarily insectivores throughout the fall, spring, and summertime. So that kind of helps me narrow in the diet type. And then we have the feeding behavior. So if you notice, there's several insectivores, but they're different feeding behaviors. So we'll see if that makes a difference. Okay, so the common methods for measuring microplastic in birds is collecting regurgitated pellets and also examining GI tracts. There's some new research that's been done on the fecal sacs, and that's actually proven to be very effective if you have birds that will actually go to a nest. So over here on the left, this is a picture of a crested caracara pellet. And over here on the right is the entire GI tract from a brown-headed cowbird that I've studied. Basically, in my research, I'll be collecting the GI tract from the esophagus all the way down to the cloaca. So here are some crested caracara nests that I found out in the fields. I'll be collecting the pellets underneath these nesting sites because these parents are going to be spending a lot of time over in the nest. So I will have more opportunity to be able to find pellets. So my goal is I'm still trying to find, and that's where I'll need all of y'all's help, 25 nests across Bexar County, Wilson, and Guadalupe counties. And so here, they're kind of hard to spot. So the one on the picture on the top is a nest up on a cypress tree, and you can actually see 2 of the parents are in. You can see their tails sticking out. And then this bottom left picture is a nest, and it's kind of hard to spot. If I didn't have this arrow here, you probably wouldn't have noticed, but it's a mass of, it's a very shallow bowl of kind of interwoven vines. And I don't know if you can see in this picture, it's kind of hard to tell, but anyways, there is what I found was really interesting is like the twine for weed whackers, a very bright plastic. They actually use that a lot in their nest. It was interwoven in between, and I found it all on the ground. So they used plastic in their nests all the time. So whenever I collect pellets, I have to record the pellet condition. Hopefully the pellet that I get is going to be intact dry or intact wet. That worst case scenario, this is one after a rain, this structure is completely degraded, I can't use it. So the picture on the left is what I'm usually trying to get. So whenever I get any reports, whenever I see a crested caracara, whenever I get any reports about crested caracara sightings, mostly I'm concerned about 2 crested caracaras or more. But if you see one, let me know. And I have an entire Google map just devoted to this, and I write down all my observations. And I also use eBird a lot. So I go through and I try to find, okay, during the breeding season, are there sightings of 2 or more birds? That's been really helpful. So how I calculate urbanization, I'm going to be calculating it by the human population density per square mile. So as you can see in this picture, the data source is from 2020 Bexar County Census tracts. And I use ArcGIS Pro to be able to map out crested caracara nesting sites. So this is a map of Bexar County divided into census blocks. And if you click on it, it'll show you the population density per square mile, which I'll be using. So once I find a nest, I plot its location, and then I create a 1.6 mile buffer, which represents the approximate breeding territory range. They don't usually go farther than about 1.6 miles away. And that's how I calculate the population density. So like I said before, in areas that have more populations, more human populations, there should be more plastic, therefore more microplastic exposure. This particular one is in McAllister Park. And so it will be very different than any regurgitated pellets from maybe South San Antonio. So moving on to actually looking at the microplastic in all the birds, the 8 species that I was speaking about. So I use a 10% potassium hydroxide solution, or a KOH solution, and there's been a lot of research about this. It's a really effective way to be able to put the entire GI tract in, and it will digest all organic matter and leave inorganic material behind, so like microplastic. So on the picture on the left, or bottom left, you can see, I'm sorry, bottom right, you can see that I have these on hot plates. They have to be at 60 degrees Celsius and spinning for 48 hours. And the top picture is what it ideally is going to look like, kind of a light amber color whenever it's finished, and all the organic material has been digested. So after that, it's a pretty simple method. Is I filter it through a vacuum filtration equipment, and the bottom right hand corner is the picture of microplastic and any of the stomach contents that is left. So let me go back. So that's actually, most of that is microplastic, but a lot of it is I found chitin from the exoskeletons from bugs. That's an inorganic material, so that stays behind. So I'm looking underneath a dissecting scope or a stereo microscope, and I'll see these gigantic ant heads in my samples. So I have to kind of push those aside. But I have a lot of that and like seed husks, but there is a lot of microplastic within here. So the crested caracara pellets, it's very similar. I tear those apart, and then I have to put these through like a mesh sieve, which you can see the picture at the bottom left-hand corner. And then I also put that through the vacuum filtration equipment and look through it under the stereo microscope. So I will not bore you with the procedure for identifying microplastic. It is very tedious and long. All I can say is it takes an hour or two to be able to get all the microplastic from each bird if I'm lucky. So I'm starting to get way faster at it this summer, which is great. But basically all I'll talk about is the microplastic that I'm looking at is 5 millimeters down to 0.1 millimeters. And I am categorizing the microplastic based on the type and the shape, size, and color. So I have this picture up here so you can just kind of see an iconic view of what these microplastics are actually looking like. So the fragments are going to be thick, a little bit, usually not as bendable pieces of plastic that have jagged edges, and the pellets are going to be spherical. You'll see that a lot in cosmetic products. Film, like in the grocery bags, that makes up a lot of the film. So it's very thin material. A lot of it is clear white or kind of yellow colored, very bendable foam, and then fiber. So that's going to be from your clothing mostly. So once I extract the microplastic, so here's a picture of a microplastic that I found in a cedar waxwing. It's a black fiber. And once I use the software, I use SafeView software to be able to measure this. So this one is 1433 micrometers, which is really not that big once you actually try to look at it from the naked eye, but it looks very big in this picture. So here's some other typical microplastic that I found in the microscope. So the top left-hand corner is really hard to see, but that's the best picture I could get. So this is an example of a film, and it's clear white. The middle picture is going to be a blue plastic fiber that I found, and the bottom right one is a picture of a fragment. So this is brown color. And so this summer I'm finishing processing all of the GI tracts and extracting the microplastic. Whenever I'm finished with that in fall 2023, I'm going to be running them through the FTIR, which is Fourier Transform Infrared Spectroscopy. So when you're identifying microplastic by sites, there can be a lot of mistakes, human error done. And even though you're following all of these rules, you can still make some mistakes. So we use FTIR for polymer analysis. So we can actually tell, okay, is this indeed microplastic? Yes, it is microplastic, but also what type of microplastic is it? So we're interested to know, what types of plastic these birds are more highly exposed to. So my preliminary results, so far I've gone through officially 3 species. I still need to finish a couple more on the cedar waxwings and white-throated sparrows, but I'm very interested in my results that I found because, like I said before, I thought that ground foraging birds would be more highly exposed to microplastic, but so far in my results, that is not the case. The white-throated sparrow, which is the ground forager, has 10 microplastic, whereas the aerial forager, purple martin, has 111. Granted, the sample size is bigger. I still need to finish the white-throated sparrow, but as you can see, there's already half of the specimens have been processed, and there's only 10. So our theories about this is purple martins can be exposed to microplastic in more urban or industrial areas. So if there's a lot of dust or pollution, what they're mainly being exposed to is fibers. So these fibers are very fluffy, they're getting into the air. And so while these birds are swooping around, they're breathing it in, and they're also eating the microfibers whenever they're hunting for insects. So like I said before, all of these birds are consuming mostly fibers. And the second top category is films and then fragments, and very little pellets I've found so far. I think that's more prevalent in probably aquatic areas, but I haven't found as many pellets so far. So the next steps, like I said, I'm finishing up the GI tracts, and then I'm doing FTIR analysis this fall, and then in the spring, which I will need y'all's help on it, is collecting regurgitated pellets from crested caracaras. So I've already found about 7, and 3 of them are not useful because they have adopted to urbanization very well, and they're on places where I can't go. Like one was over in CPS area, another one is on I think it's a cell phone tower, so I can't go and collect over there. But so yeah, so ways that y'all can help is reduce your plastic usage. So like you said, a lot of what we're recycling is not actually being recycled. I think it was like 9% or 10% is actually being recycled, which is really sad. I recycle, but ultimately the best way is just to try to cut down on your plastic usage, which I know is almost impossible. But another way that y'all can help is to still participate in the Lights Out program. Is anyone here participated in the Lights Out Texas? Oh, nice. Thank you so much. You're helping me with my research. So that's through Texas A&M, but they're providing more than half of the birds that I've been studying so far. And also reporting the sightings of crested caracaras. I think I have, I have my email later on in the questions area, so you can email me directly if you have any crested caracara sightings. Just like one sighting or one bird is okay, but if you find 2 or more, that's cool. I'm really excited about that, so please email me. So if you aren't already aware of what crested caracaras look like, I'll just go over this really briefly. So this is a really great picture. My PI, Jennifer Smith, took this photo. So you can see right here with the red bare face that's the adult. So it's going to have a black body, a black cap, and a bare skin around its face, and it's red color. You can also notice that they have yellow legs. Now, the ones around it, I think the other parent is behind. But the other birds that you can see are the juveniles. So they're going to be brown, and their neck is it's whitish, but not very white yet. They have brown caps, and you can see that the bald skin around their face is pink, and their legs are more of a grayish color. So that's a really easy way. The face and the legs, where you can tell. So usually you're going to see them flying around, and it took me a little bit to be able to decipher them from black vultures, because you will see them a lot of the times hanging out with black vultures because they have a better sense of smell, and they'll follow them and then go and feed on the carcass with them. So as you can see, they do look similar to the black vultures. You know, they have like the white gloves. But a major way that you can tell the difference is vultures, when they're flying, they kind of have like a V shape. When you're seeing their profile, and these caracaras are going to be very flat, and their flapping is not soaring as much. It seems more erratic to me. So once you become familiar with their flapping, you'll be able to identify it almost certainly. But that's a great way to be able to tell the difference, is not the V shape. Their wingspan is more flattened. Okay, and I just need to acknowledge my advisor, Jennifer Smith. She's done so much work and help for me, and also my graduate committee, which is Zach Konzatek and James Dwyer. Zach is actually a member here at the Audubon Society, but he said he couldn't be here today. I also need to thank Texas A&M and all of the students that have been helping me, Alex Hoxie, Kane, Anna, and Carlos and Sergio. Without their help, I wouldn't have been able to collect all the birds and the pellets as I have so far. So here's my email. If y'all want to take a picture of it, you're welcome to. And if you see any sightings of crested caracaras, please let me know. In the heading, please put like crested caracara sighting, so I can put that in my filters and be able to respond to you. Any questions?
Okay. How big are those pellets? Are they smaller than an owl pellet, or?
You know what? I never actually dissected an owl pellet whenever I was in high school. So they're about it was about this size. The ones that I've been finding, the ones that are fragmented, no, but that's about the size that I've been looking at. They're like grayish brown colored, the pellets.
Questions? Mm-hmm. The first, regarding the sightings, are you interested because most of the time I see crested caracaras are just flying over.
Mm-hmm.
Are you interested in flyovers, or are you mostly interested if we see them in the tree or on the ground in like a stationary location?
That's a good. I would say if you keep seeing, like if they're flying and you only see one, maybe not as much as like if they're hanging out somewhere, but if you keep seeing them flying around, like in my neighborhood, there's one, I know that there's another nest because there's one close to where I live, and then there is another one, I believe, a couple miles away, but it keeps flying over my house. Is like tantalizing me. So if you keep seeing the same one flying over, let me know. That would be really helpful because that means you're in their territory.
My other question is about the vacuum filtration. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Does it have to do with like evaporating the liquid, or what is that?
Oh yeah, so let me see if I can go back so you can kind of see it. Might be too far back. So the vacuum filtration is basically, it's creating a suction. Here you go. So it's going to be creating a suction, and you're going to be pouring it into the funnel on top. And then there's a filter paper, which you can see on the right. There's a filter paper down there. And so that line is connected to the vacuum system. And so it's going to be creating a vacuum. It pulls all the water down, all the liquid down, and it'll be leaving all of the solids behind.
I just want to follow up on what he was saying. It saved me an email, I think. I see a pair almost every night over by my mother-in-law's place on Northwest Military. They're flying over. It's Phil Hardberger, but it's a southern one over there by the Savannah area. And my question would be, are they already going to McAllister? I mean,
No, so Phil Hardberger Park, okay, that's west of 281, right? Is that the one with the natural bridge?
Right.
Okay, yes. I've tried to find those crested caracaras. I couldn't find them. I need to talk to Wendy again to find the nest because I think that they've moved so far. But no, that's too far away for the crested caracaras because, like I said, it's about a 1.6 mile radius during breeding season. So it'd be too far away from Phil Hardberger Park to McAllister Park. So
from Allen, HEB, across the highway there, and it's usually around dusk, somewhere between 6, and I see it like
yeah, so they might be, if are they hanging out around that HEB and they're kind of perched?
Sometimes, right.
So they're probably, their nest is pretty close if I had to guess, because I've actually had the most luck in the evening going and looking for crested caracaras, and the reason why is they kind of loaf around near their nesting site pretty close, and then I can sit there, watch them, and then they'll fly back over to their nest. And one of them will either sit on the nest or another one will be roosting really close to it. That's been the most effective way that I've been able to find them. I have lots of stories of my husband has helped me a lot. Or we'll have headphones in our ears and he's like, go east, and I'll be running through the forest and he's looking with his binoculars and they're flying. They've led me on some chases trying to find the one in McAllister Park. They took me a while to find them, a couple evenings, but I found them. So any help that you can give, because when Jen was telling me about using crested caracaras as a model species, Dr. James Smith did research on the crested caracaras in Florida, which they're, I believe they're endangered over there. And so she did research on that, but their habitat is very different than here. She's like, oh, it's so easy to find a nest. You'll have no problem. Like you just walk into the field and then look at the sole tree. They enjoy the tree in Florida is called a cabbage tree. It looks like a palm. That's usually where they'll be staying. And she's like, I can tell you immediately. I'll just walk into the field. It's not like that in Texas. You don't do that. Oh my gosh, you didn't do that. So they usually are within like maybe 10 yards or something of like a clear grassland area. So, but sometimes they're even farther than that. So they've been a little bit more difficult to find.
I found it interesting that the range is only 1.6. That's a diameter, or is that?
That's the radius. Yeah.
Yeah, so like 3 miles.
Yeah, and this is during breeding season. So, but I mean, it's very long in Texas. So they can have 2 breeding, or they can have 2 nestlings. Usually If their first was successful, they might try to have a second one, but they don't have a very good survival rate when they do try to have. So that's probably why they have it all the way to September.
On your preliminary findings, it had a very large percentage of the microplastic fiber. You said the fiber was from washing our clothes?
It's mostly from that, yes.
And how could we, like, what can we do to reduce that?
That's interesting. I think someone, like some engineer, is going to have to find the solution for that. I think that I've read about certain bags that you can put your clothes in, but I don't know how effective they are. But I have read some research articles were talking about putting a filter on your washer so that it filters the fibers out. Because unfortunately, we don't even in our wastewater treatment plants, we don't even have the capacity to be able to filter out these fibers. There's about like 90% of the fibers actually pass through. And that's how the agricultural soil is so contaminated. Because we use the sludge for fertilizer.
That was going to be my question. I was wondering why the ags had so much more plastic than before.
Yeah, so I actually have a slide about that, just in case if someone asks. Oh, there it is. So, like I said, when it goes into wastewater treatment plants, about 90% of the microplastic remains. So basically, after it's treated, there's this sludge, and it's very nutrient rich. And so 90% of the microplastic is still in this sludge. So we recycle, we use this fertilizer, we put it into agricultural soil. And they found that in 1 year in North America and Europe, there's about like 44 to 300,000 tons of microplastic in agricultural soil, which is actually more microplastic that's floating on the ocean surface. So it's a lot. And so that's why I'm thinking that the purple martins are having so much fiber ingested. And if you think about it, if they're swooping behind one of these tractors that has all this dust coming up and kicking up all these insects that they're eating, it's going to be kicking up a lot of microplastic soil. So I did not know this before I did this research. It's pretty scary. So whenever they say your plants or your vegetables are organic, I'm like, I don't think you know about microplastic in the soil.
So the plastic bags that we see floating on mesquite trees, flapping in the breeze, does that degrade into microfibers, or is that just going to be the sheet plastic?
That'll be mostly the films that you're going to be seeing. Yeah, I've been watching a couple of bags on my way back home, and they're flapping in the breeze, and especially they break down faster outside because of the sun and the wind, just physical abrasions than, if they were in the water. So, but yeah, it'll degrade into either, films. It wouldn't be fragments because they're very flimsy.
There's a question in the chat. I think maybe it's for Brent. When you were talking about removing labels from plastic items for recycling, the question is, are plastic bottles with plastic labels rejected too?
Yes.
That's what I was curious about.
Plastic bottles with so if you buy milk or juice, they'll have a label that's wrapped around it and glued on one side. You can cut that and pull that off. And that's cool. That helps. There's the heat shrunk plastic labels, and I don't know how to do that, but that's not recyclable, even if they have the heat. So an example of the heat shrunk plastic label is going to be like on a small or a single-use bottle that, like Gatorade is a good example. I saw a Gatorade bottle that had that heat shrunk on it. This is an example, right? No, that's not. Okay, never mind. But yeah, that's I don't know how to do that. I haven't figured that one out yet. But, yeah. So something like this, you would cut this off, and then it's glued right here, and you just pull that off. And
I just wondered that you think that they'd be able, especially like if there's paper over it. I always thought in the heating process that it would just burn up and it wouldn't matter. Wow.
They automatically just kick it out, like any excuse to not have process that.
I've seen conflicting instructions on if you should leave the lids on or take them off. Like I see on some soda bottles, just leave the lid on, but when I thought from the city, it said to take the lids off, and so it's like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Right. Well, they can't recycle the lid, so that plastic is not recyclable. So if you have the option of throwing it away in your regular trash, then do that. I think the reason they say leave the soda bottles on is if you ever go to the park, you look around, what do you see all over the place? Is bottle caps everywhere. I go work out in the morning. I do an outdoor exercise class at Phil Hartberger Park, and just walking with my car to the basketball courts and back again, I'll pick up 12 or 13 of these. So I think that's why they say that. Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know how we advocate for eliminating plastic grocery bags.
Yeah.
That's the law that said you can't.
Are they working on any solutions to like taking care of this before?
For microplastic?
Because we're gonna, like Nancy said, we're gonna be full of microplastics here pretty soon.
Oh, well, I mean, we already are.
We already are, but they gotta do something to nip it in the bud there.
That's a good question. I think it would be really getting it to at the source is not producing plastic. I don't really know what we would have to do to be able, I think it's impossible to be able to clean up microplastic in the terrestrial environment once it's there. But we can prevent it from entering. So that's something that we can work on. I'd be really interested. I should do some research, especially on like filters on capturing fibers and not releasing that into the environment. But yeah, it would be just not using plastic, which is really easy to say. You can't, I was trying to, whenever I started this research, to not use any plastic if possible.
We have another question in the chat. Are all plastics equal, or are some types more common in the environment, such as styrofoam, PVC?
Yes, I can't remember that off the top of my head. I had it. So I know it was, PVC was one of the top ones. Oh, here it is. Okay. In one of the studies that I found, there is acrylic, the most common one, PET, PP, polyester, nylon, but like a lot of them, 92% of all manufactured plastics consist of like polyethylene, polyvinyl chloride, polypropylene, polyurethane, polyethylene terephthalate. So those are the main ones that they've found so far. So I'd be interested to figure out what these birds, like what type of microplastic they're actually consuming. So I'll know that in the fall.
Are there any microplastics inks?
Are there any, what was that?
Microplastics in ink, in inks.
Oh, in
If you go to HEB, you say on a paper bag, and you think you're getting something that's environmentally great.
Yeah.
It's not. HEB, a whole bunch of stuff on there.
I don't, that is a good question. I don't actually know the answer to that. I don't think so, but you know, it could be surprising. There could be. I don't know the answer to that, but I can look it up.
Did you do the dissections yourself on the birds?
I have done a lot of dissections, but a lot of them are coming from Texas A&M. So we actually have gone down there a couple of times, and her name's Heather Prestridge.
Right.
She's, I don't know if you know her, but she's over at Texas A&M Collections. And this is a huge warehouse. And so she does a lot of specimen upkeep. And so we had a ton of students, and we just dissected a lot of birds all day long. So I got pretty good at it. They tried to teach me how to make museum specimens, That's very hard. It's like taxidermy. Mine did not look like a bird afterwards. I think I need some more practice on that, but I'm very good at getting the GI tracks from them.
So is there a level of degradation that you no longer use the GI tract?
Basically, yes, if there is like maggots growing, if it's very decayed, and basically I'm just concerned if the GI tract is intact. So if you see, you know, it's torn open or something like that and something was nibbling on it, probably the GI tract is punctured or missing, and that wouldn't be very useful for me. But if you see maggots on it, it's a pretty good sign that it's probably it's too late for me to use.
So that large machine that you showed, the one that can tell you what type of microplastic you have, like what can you learn from that? Does it quantify or weigh the plastic or?
So what it's doing, sure of that. So basically, you see that knob, it actually has this arm and it pulls out, and then I put the microplastic on the screen, and it has this diamond that you press down into the microplastic, and it's going to be passing infrared light through the plastic, and it's going to be measuring. So some of the plastic is going to be absorbing the light, and then it's going to be measuring whatever is coming through it. And so that's how it's able to identify. Very basic. If you ask Zach, because Zach Tonzicek is actually the one who is teaching me on how to use the FTIR. I'm using the one in his chemistry department. And you ask him and he knows stuff. So
we have someone in the chat said that a website called plasticpreneur.com is a great resource for building recycling efforts. So don't put that in our newsletter or website.
Plastic what?
It's like entrepreneur, but it's just the last part, plasticpreneur.
Oh, sounds like plastic.
I don't know the connection between the dark skies and having all the birds.
Okay. So the Texas Lights Out, or Lights Out Texas, basically, from what I know, I'm not involved in it, but they are collecting birds from, is it collisions?
Yeah, so the whole protocol around Lights Out is to go and measure bird collisions. And so that protocol calls for doing surveys around buildings from 6 in the morning to 8 in the morning, collect all those specimens, put them in a refrigeration bag, and then freeze them as quickly as possible. And then the frozen specimens are shipped to Heather at Texas A&M.
So what time of day? 6 to 8 morning?
Yeah, 6 in the morning to 8.
We were collecting at 6 in the morning. We had booths set up downtown, and it was Bear Audubon members were doing this. And you want to go before the crews who work for the building maintenance and the street crews come out and collect the birds. We would try to be cleanup crews, and we had kits.
So the birds might have hit the buildings because of the light at nighttime, and then you're collecting them at that time. Okay,
so they're migrating, like while they're migrating from the south up north or north to south, there's thousands of birds at night passing overhead. And so I do know the reason why it's called Lights Out is they're trying to encourage people to turn their lights off, because that's disrupting their flight patterns and it confuses them and they run into windows. So that's why we search for them in the morning, because usually they're when they're migrating. Yeah.
I think that's it.
One more question in the back.
You might have mentioned this, but does the microplastic you're finding in the birds, are they digesting all of it out, or does it just like stay in?
That's a really good question. So what I've seen so far is smaller pieces of plastic kind of go through, like fibers have been going through, but larger pieces have been sticking around. I actually was just talking to one of my colleagues. He is doing microplastic research on an aquatic environment with tadpoles. And he's finding that a lot of the times the plastic is not moving. The larger pieces of plastic are not moving through. They're actually staying. So they can be blocking at a certain point the GI tracts. But with the birds so far, I've seen, like I said, like 86% were fibers, so that's going to be passing through them.
Are the birds that you've studied and plastics they suggest, are they getting that directly from the environment or through eating other animals?
So that is also another good question. So there's proof that there's trophic transfer so like, let's start with insects. They're eating microplastic, and then a smaller bird eats that insect and is ingesting microplastic, and then a hawk comes by, sweeps up and gets that bird, then they're eating microplastic, and so on and so forth. So they have seen that there's a research article done on red-shouldered hawks and ospreys, and they found, I believe it was the red-shouldered hawks, they had a lot more microplastic in them than the ospreys.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming and being a part of this. Sharing.